Hello, and welcome to Today in the World, where I'll be talking about news from around the world and giving you some of my thoughts sometimes. So, just coming back to the South China Sea region again, we seem to over and over for differing reasons every time. But just like the Middle East, it's just one of those areas that we'll be continuing to talk about for a while, just because of how tense the region is currently. Anyways, right now, Indonesia is hosting international joint military exercises with a bunch of different countries. They've been doing this with the U.S. For a while now. I think it goes back to, off the top of my head, I think 2014 when they started doing this with the U.S. But anyway, the reporting comes from VOA News in the United States, where thousands of military personnel from the U.S. and Indonesia, as well as 8 other countries, began 2 weeks of exercises on Monday that were focused on joint capabilities in the Asia Pacific. The South China Sea has seen tensions rise this year with flashpoints between the United States and China, as well as other nations in the region, due to China claiming sovereignty over disputed islands and waterways. Um, these exercises have been held for a while now between Indonesia and other countries. I believe since 2007, Indonesia's been holding joint military drills with other countries. And these drills that they've been holding is just been essentially designed to enhance collective capabilities and movements between the militaries. The exercises were joined by Australia and Japan, Britain, Singapore, South Korea, Canada, New Zealand, and France. I think it was kind of a shame that more regional countries weren't taking part. And specifically, I think it's kind of too bad that the Philippines is not taking part in the joint military exercises with Indonesia. I'm not sure if that's because Indonesia is just looking to distance itself from taking on any um, kind of what's what I'm looking for. Like they want to appear neutral to China and to the U.S. and bringing I don't know why, but I feel like I know the U.S. is there, but bringing the Philippines there, I think could almost be seen as strengthening the regional um, opposition forces against China that are being kind of spearheaded by the Philippines at the moment. Because the Philippines have been holding all sorts of joint military training with other countries in the region. They have been having constant clashes with China in the South China Sea. Most recently, I believe a Chinese ship had rammed the Philippine ship, and and China is obviously blaming the Philippines on this. Philippines is obviously blaming China on this. It's just one more incident in a long line of incidents that has been increasing tensions in the region. Um, and I do think, like, I know it probably wouldn't have been the best thing to do, but I do think it would have been a good way to showcase increased regional cooperation by including the Philippines in these exercises. Um, and this does come as, according to the Diplomat, which is a Chinese or Japanese newspaper, the new president of Indonesia has made a visit to China to deepen the bilateral ties between the countries. It looks like China and Indonesia will be resuming joint military exercises. They stopped in, I think it was like 2015, when there was an incident in the sea near Indonesia. Um, and people have been looking at this, the way it's all going down, and they've been saying, "Oh, it kind of looks like this is Indonesia's way of telling China, I'm not allied with the U.S., and telling the U.S., I'm not allied with China," by just kind of doing joint military exercises with both of them, remain keeping ties with both of them. It's not gonna take sides in this geopolitical contest that's currently going on in the region, because they're having joint military exercises with the U.S. and visiting China and planning joint military exercises with China. It signals they don't want to pick a side. China presumably would use these military exercises to build trust with Indonesia, because I have seen it reported that Indonesia is the leading nation in ASEAN, which is a group of those Southeast Asian nations. Yeah, I think it's like I understand Indonesia's position where they want to remain neutral. I think it's kind of a shame because Indonesia does understand the risk posed by China in terms of their territorial claims they constantly make due to clashes they've had in the past. It was actually these clashes that stopped the joint military training that Indonesia and China have had in the past. I'm not saying they should necessarily side with the US over China or side with China over the US, but I don't think it would be bad to maybe, you know, deepen ties with the Philippines against China in terms of just the territorial conflict ongoing. Um, yeah, it's almost kind of a shame how closely the Philippines is tied to the U.S. because that does almost put certain nations that don't want to get into the bad books of China at an arm's distance from the Philippines. But anyway, it's going to be interesting to see how the current tensions in the region affect alliances and security ties between all these countries. Also, in the South China Sea, Taiwan has been drilling with anti-amphibious landing missiles as a way to deter an attack from China. This is reporting done by the Taipei Times, which is a Taiwanese newspaper, that the troops there have been testing anti-amphibious landing missiles. They've been drilling with these missiles to remain mobile and to deter attacks from China. The missiles they're using are most effective against anti-tank. Well, they're most effective against tanks, so the most popular anti-tank weapons in the world. And the experts cite this as a component in Taiwan's best strategy to resist potential Chinese invasion. This does come as China is increasing their military threats toward Taiwan. They're increasing their interference in the economic zones in the South China Sea toward other countries. They've been sending warplanes and warships near Taiwan on a nearly daily basis. Like they're trying to intimidate the public and degrade Taiwan's defenses. Um, Taiwan now actually, in response, has increased the length of their mandatory national military service to a year, and they have also been importing more and more sophisticated equipment from the U.S. They've actually bought 1,700 units of the missiles that they were drilling with today, which good for them. The thing about Taiwan is like it can be a bit of a weird nation to talk about because it's not recognized as a nation by everybody. Um, they don't. A lot of countries don't recognize Taiwan as a nation for fear of China, especially in that region. Um, and just the way that Taiwan fits into the geopolitical structure of the region, the way it relates to other countries in the region, is is a very complex topic. Um, there'd be just a lot to talk about regarding that. It's actually kind of crazy. Anyway, Taiwan is almost essentially alone um, in the region that it's located, especially with China making constant territorial claims on the island. I think a lot of what's happening right now is almost like waiting for the conclusion of the U.S. elections before they do anything. I say that especially regarding China in the region, kind of waiting to see who gets elected, to see if it's someone who would be softer on their territorial claims, on their infringement of other nations' sovereignty. Um, so I think it's going to be kind of interesting to see what happens in these areas after the U.S. election, just to see how these nations respond and react to whoever gets elected. Yeah, I'm a little bit excited, a lot bit worried, but anyway, moving away from the South China Sea, I was talking about Iran and and the Middle East and Hezbollah. because Hezbollah has been exchanging increasingly escalatory strikes with Israel. Exchanging, they've both been firing, very clear on that. Hezbollah stated they fired more than 300 rockets, and that apparently this is the first phase in their attack against Israel, according to the BBC News reporting. It's kind of rough for Lebanon, where Hezbollah is located, because it doesn't really look like they can um, afford an escalation of this conflict. Um, they have a very unstable electrical grid. They have a very unstable banking system, and all of this would just get worse if any conflict escalates. This would be especially hard on the people living in Lebanon. But anyway, and this is after we've seen Hamas officials going to Cairo but not attending the ongoing Gaza talks. This is reporting done again from the VOA in the United States that apparently the Hamas delegation arrived on Saturday in Cairo to be nearer at hand to review proposals that emerged from the talks between Israel and the mediators of Egypt, Qatar, and the United States. It doesn't look like there's going to be any breakthrough in these ceasefire talks because there are certain sticking points that neither side wants to give up. Specifically, there is Israel's insistence on controlling the border between Gaza and Egypt, and it looks like that's quite a big sticking point, even for the mediators of Egypt, because they do not want Israel patrolling a border between them and Gaza. Curious. So anyway, they've done hours, days of ceasefire talks in Cairo, and they have made no progress. We've heard the U.S. be very optimistic on the topic and say a ceasefire is coming, a deal is coming, but again, they're ending talks and there's no ceasefire being made. It doesn't look like there's progress being made, so leave that up to you if the U.S. is being overly optimistic on the situation. So it looks like that Israel will be continuing the war with Gaza, and there might be a new conflict on Israel's northern border with Lebanon. And on top of that, we still haven't seen the retaliatory strikes that Iran has promised. So, and that comes after 1 month of the assassination of the Hamas leader on Iran territory. So this region is extremely tense, and it seems to get worse and worse, and nothing seems to be letting up. Like, there's no release valve for tension. Um, so I mean, it can only ratchet up and up and up until something blows. I know the metaphor hits a little too close to home. Anyway, there's reporting done by Medusa, which is a Latvian newspaper, and this is moving on to the Russia-Ukraine conflict because Russia has attacked Ukraine using more than 100 missiles and about 100 drones that have been targeting Ukraine's energy facilities. I've seen reporting that 3 people have died, and it looks like this is a response to the offensive of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Kursk region. And I don't know why, but it looks like the Ukraine has been looking for longer ranged weaponry, presumably aimed at targeting deeper into Russian territory with their missile strikes. Um, this also looks like this just looks like a conflict that's not going to go away for maybe another 5 to 10 years, unless something drastically changes. The U.S. election could drastically change things in the region, but we'll see how that goes. Anyway, that's all I have for you today, and if I've missed any international news stories, please let me know. I can be reached via my email, todayintheworld2024@gmail.com, or in the comment section of YouTube, Rumble, or Spotify. I hope this was informative and that you listen to me next time. I will continue to monitor these stories and let you know what's happening today in the world.